Welcome to the Daily Word. This is a ministry of Redeemer Bible Church. My name is Todd. I'm one of the pastors there, and I'm excited to be bringing to you today Revelation chapter 13. Well, this is an exciting book, isn't it? Sometimes hard to understand by some of the symbols that are there, but it's pointing to the second coming of Christ. There's an anticipation there. I love this time of year because it's Christmas, and there's always an anticipation of Christmas and the joy of Christmas and what we celebrate in the incarnation of Jesus Christ. Well, there's an excitement as we read this great book and understanding Christ's second coming. And so, chapter 13 is no exception here. It gets really juicy in this chapter. Chapter 12, as a reminder, was an illustration of this tension between Satan and God's people, specifically the Jews. And the Jews were categorized as a woman giving birth to a son, and that son was Jesus Christ, the ultimate triumphant one over Antichrist. And we see that showing itself in the future too, as we find ourselves in the tribulation period, the 7-year period where Antichrist reigns over the earth. After God's people are raptured out, there's a revival among the Jewish people, and they begin to witness to those who are left. People come to faith, specifically the Jewish people, and they become a target. They have a 3.5-year period of peace with Antichrist, but then after that, it's all off. And so they have to flee. God protects them and cares for them. And now we find the ascension of the Antichrist and his false prophet in chapter 13, which is really a tale of two beasts, but no beauty. The beauty comes later. Hope you like that pun there. With these two beasts, we see Satan's best attempts at world domination. He's pretty successful for a time being, but just remember this always. Satan, everywhere you see in here, has an expiration date. He has a short time, and then it's up. Basically, Satan is like a carton of milk in God's refrigerator. He's got an expiration date, and with the coming and return of Christ, that expiration date comes to fruition, and he's kicked out. Let's take a look here. Again, we can't cover every single verse, but I want to give you an overview of these two beasts. The first beast is said here in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea. Last we had it in chapter 12. Satan is standing on the seashore, and this is what we see. With 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on his horns, and blasphemous names on his heads, on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. Well, who is this beast that's referenced several times in Revelation? It's the Antichrist. And Satan gives him his power. And we see this combination, this weird picture. I wanted to show you a couple pictures, and I looked it up on the internet, but they were just so cheesy. They can't do justice to what's being described here. But we see the leopard, which, if you remember from the book of Daniel, represented the kingdom of Greece, the Greek Empire. And then you see the bear, that was the Medo-Persian Empire. And you see the lion, which was the Babylonian Empire. Those were all preceding in Daniel 7 the coming of the Son of Man, which came at the first advent of Jesus. Now you see them all combined into one beast. So it's the worst of the worst, all combined to make one beast. And you see a variety of other things taking place here in this that we can't cover in great detail, but we can touch upon this visual picture of the Antichrist and his rule and this dominion that he has. And he's empowered by Satan to have authority over the whole world. We see this. He has a mortal wound coming up here that he's resurrected from. Now, he's the Antichrist. Christ is there. And yet, what we find is that he's a counterfeit. Whether this was a real resurrection or not, most likely a counterfeit resurrection. And all the world, the whole world, is mesmerized by this, and they worship the beast because of this. But it says that he has only 42 months. He will reign, he will have his day, but it will be 3.5 years. The second half of the 3.5 years of the 7-year reign of the tribulation time period. And he makes war with all the believers. Everyone worshiped him except the believers. It says in verse 8 here, it says, and all who dwell on the earth will worship it, the beast, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. That's Jesus. Jesus purchased our salvation. It was designed before the foundation of the world. So you see this assurance given. They're going to go through a really difficult time. Christians go through difficult times of suffering and persecution and martyrdom. And it's no exception here. It's even heightened that we see it here in the tribulation. And the call here is in verse 10. Here's a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. This beast, in all his ugliness, all his power, it says that he has blasphemous names. All of those kingdoms that preceded, that have come, all the world kingdoms, a lot of those emperors made themselves to be worshipped. That's a blasphemy to the one true God. And so these believers, these Jewish remnant of believers, are called to endure and to have faith. But they have the assurance that their salvation was purchased was purchased in Christ as the Lamb who was slain and was decided before the foundation of the world. What assurance that is. Now we get a second beast. The second beast. Chapter 13, verse 11. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had two horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. Now many refer to this as the false prophet that is to come. Two horns like a lamb. There's a counterfeit, a twisting of the Lamb who was slain. So you see a counterfeit of that. He spoke like the dragon, it says here. He was given authority like the first beast. And yet his job is to make sure that the first beast is worshiped. So we find this religious person here. He's a priest, or the high priest, or the false prophet, a counterfeit lamb, grotesque. Now here's the point. Every fool needs a hype man. And this is the Antichrist hype man, this false prophet that's later alluded to in chapter 16, verse 13, chapter 19 as well. He has counterfeit miracles that we see here. He's deceptively effective because of it. Those who refuse to worship the first beast is slain, just like in Daniel's day when they didn't want to bow to Nebuchadnezzar and to his idols. They were slain, or at least they were intended to be, and God protected them. Yet these petty leaders require loyalty, and we see this here. And there's much speculation that's been given about this, but you'll notice this. Also, it causes all, the beast, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead. Whether that's literal or not, we don't know, but it shows authority over the person, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom, John says. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of man, and his number is 666. Or some ancient translations say 616. Either way, it's the number of man. They're slain, those who refuse to worship him, those who refuse to have this mark on their hands and their head. Again, whether it's literal or not, that's conjecture. Certainly we have the technology is caught up to something like that to be literal, of course. But that's the way leaders oppress. That's the way tyranny oppresses. We see it in our own day with some of the things that the world leaders try to enforce upon us to exact their control and their power. And there's going to be no exception in the coming days to come. Now, what do we apply in this? What we see here is that ultimately this is the greatest that man can be. This is the mark of man, but he falls short of the mark of God, which is often referred to as the number 7, which is a perfect number according to the scriptures, 666, 616. Either way, man falls short. And this is the ultimate. This is the ultimate kingdom over all the earth, the ultimate ruler, the Antichrist, not just a Antichrist, an Antichrist, powered by by the false prophet and by the evil spirit of Satan. What we got to be careful of, though, is to try and interpret and try to speculate about these things by reading the headlines and trying to match the headlines. There's There's been fake news shows that have tried to do that, to try to interpret the headlines and try to make it fit into the scriptures. What's going to happen is going to be obvious. This is worldwide. For us as believers, we believe in the paradigm that we believe in, that the believers are going to be raptured and delivered from this. And yet there will be believers after that happens that spring up. There'll be a revival among the Jewish nation for 7 years. We're going to see this turmoil taking place in the ascension of this Antichrist and his false prophet. What we see here is that Satan is a counterfeit. He can't create his own. These are antichrists. These are counterfeit Christ, counterfeit false prophet to the true and living God, to the true and living Christ. God's people will face persecution, but are always given hope and assurance. God's truth makes error obvious. And so we've got to know God's truth. All around us are the deceptive practices of the devil, even now. Whether the Antichrist is alive or not, we just don't know. Could be. Christ could come back at any time. But in God's word, we're called to this. I love what 1 Thessalonians 5:21 through 22 says. But test everything, hold fast to what is good, abstain from every form of evil. We don't have to try to predict the headlines. What we need to do is know the truth so that when we see counterfeits come, we can stand against it and contend for the faith. Remember that today as you go about your business and go about your day. Have a great day in the Lord.